Oh, welcome back. It's just gone 12 minutes after 3 on this Wednesday. You're watching Today here on eNCA channel 403. My name is William Lahong. Plans to extradite the Gupta brothers from the UAE are gaining momentum. Justice and Correctional Services Minister Ronald Lamola met with his UAE counterpart, Abdullah Sultan bin Awad Al Nuaimi, in Abu Dhabi earlier this week. Let's get more details on that meeting. Justice and Correctional Services spokesperson joins us live right now in studio. Chrispin, Phiri, a very good afternoon and welcome to Today. Let's talk about how the discussions went. I imagine very productive.
Yes, indeed, very productive, but also frank and robust discussions between the two ministers. And the minister definitely outlined his concerns about how the UAE had initially responded to our request, particularly also initially presented the responses in between, giving us updates. And the minister really did stress that it didn't signify the level of cooperation that is promised by evidence and promised by the bilateral agreements that we have signed, and both justice ministers did undertake to ensure that that is corrected with immediate effect, and ensuring that moving forward as well, the level of interaction between the prosecuting authorities is more direct as much as possible, so that their different time lags can be reduced through the diplomatic channels, but also more cooperation and direct communication would lead to effective requests and cooperation where necessary. So in the sense, that was one of the major outcomes of the meeting, to ensure that in the immediate sense there's a process to review the application that was sent by South Africa with the view to understand what had happened with the warrants in particular. As you would recall, one of the issues that were raised was that there was an old warrant that was presented by the South African authorities, but our prosecutors re-clarified to the Justice Ministry in the UAE that both warrants were present and they were acting on the advice of the Justice Ministry in the UAE. So there is a process in place now. I think as soon as the 15th of June, both the prosecuting authorities will be engaging on the new process required to either resubmit the extradition application, or also to establish exactly what the way forward can be between the authorities themselves.
Sure. Chrispin, please unpack for us just that correlation of information between the prosecuting authorities of the two countries, because before the minister left for the UAE, during the budget vote, during the debate in Parliament, obviously a lot of questions were raised about the handling of the Gupta brothers' extradition. Some were even going as far as saying there may have been a bungling of matters and issues that brought us to where we are now. How has that now moved forward?
Yes, we have placed a number of questions before the UAE authorities that we would be receiving a formal response to around the preceding extradition application. Because, like I say, one of the issues that we firmly put on the table is that at every step of the extradition process, we acted on the advice of the Emirati authorities. And that's so because, William, it's a very different jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And in any event, in extraditions, you rely on the prosecuting authority of that country to represent you in their own court systems and place the documents for you on your behalf in that court system. So it is not as if you can send your own legal representative to go there and extradite people on your behalf. You really rely strongly on that prosecuting authority. So we did emphasize that it's still unclear to us as to how there was a mentioning of an old warrant when we were acting on their advice. And so they will seek clarity on that. But also the other issue that we really wanted to emphasize was the fact that when we read their court's judgment, one of the things that they did say is that they believe that they have a competent authority to investigate a money laundering charge and prosecute them. And we wanted to understand whether there's progress in that prosecution from our side. So we will be getting clarity on that formally from the UAE authorities in writing. But also what's very critical is that there will be very close cooperation between prosecuting authorities directly between themselves, which would not necessarily always go through the diplomatic channel. Yes, where formal updates are required and formal action is required to be taken, that will go through the diplomatic channel. But what we have really struck gold on is more cooperation directly between the two prosecuting authorities, which is what we see with other jurisdictions across the world, which we enjoy very good bilateral relations with. There's a very direct relationship between the prosecuting authorities or the investigative bodies, and then that cooperation is ultimately then formalized through the diplomatic channels.
And I imagine the issue of the red notice then comes in so that when the Gupta brothers land anywhere in the world, that would take effect.
Indeed, and one of the direct issues that we did and we'll be getting clarity on from them formally is how the red notice may have been waived if indeed they say that these individuals are now citizens of Vanuatu. How would that citizenship have been acquired, and what is the impact of that citizenship for their relationship with the United Arab Emirates, because these people would have gotten a particular residency based on the South African papers that they would have presented. So those are some of the things that we will be getting proper clarity on. But moving forward, provided that they are still in the country, what then happens in light of our extradition application being renewed?
I get you. And just for an ordinary South African who's following this story and has an interest in the justice system, I know things tend to move very slowly within the justice system, but I imagine there are timelines that you're working on. Do you have those? Can you share those with us? Are you privy to that information?
What we can say is by the 15th of June, we will be in a very good position to understand the clear steps that are required for us to renew our extradition application. But one of the things that actually do delay the justice system is not necessarily one not being able to provide timelines, but what the legal system provides for itself. So counter applications, contestations, and unfortunately you can't put a timeline to that, but you can't predict whether a particular application will come or not. A classic example, for instance, is in Malawi, where we are dealing with an extradition application, which should be very straightforward. We've submitted our papers, but we've had to contend, at least the Director of Public Prosecutions in Malawi has had to contend with various applications from the fugitive Shepherd Bushiri. And the latest one now is there's been a new counter application or interlocutory application. As a result, the law enforcement agencies that we had presented to the Malawian authorities to authenticate our documents were not able to do so because there's a new application that has been filed by the Bushiris. So that's difficult to anticipate because the justice system does allow for multiple processes so that people are able to truly say, I've really presented my best foot forward and I've tried my best to absolve myself in every way possible, and then they answer the questions that are put to them. So it's difficult, William, in short, to put a time frame because of the other processes that the justice system does cater for.
And it's imperative for a South African to understand that there are a lot of moving parts. Thank you so much for your time, Chrispin. Justice and Correctional Services spokesperson Chrispin Phiri just giving us more details on the extradition of the Gupta brothers and the bilateral discussions that have just recently taken place in the United Arab Emirates with the Justice and Correctional Services Minister, Ronald Lamola. We're going to move on to